Hello, welcome to another one of our videos, and this one's sort of a quick video where I wanted just to discuss agility training and specifically the populations of people that it relates to, because there's a perception that it's only for sporting athletes, so that's the first thing people think about is someone like soccer players here, or someone basketball or tennis, football, any type of those sporting things is the people we think about that need agility, and that it's the only ones we use it for. So that basically there's no value in using it for someone who just wants to lose weight, or someone wants to improve strength, or just general fitness, even weight loss. And it's definitely never considered for the person in their mid to late 70s who wants to prevent falling and just wants to maintain good quality of movement. So basically all of those assumptions are all wrong, and I'm going to explain why, and why I believe agility training is very underrated and very neglected type of training that would benefit people of all ages, and the people you think of the least, and they're probably the ones that need it the most. So firstly, defining, it's really good to actually define what agility is. So simple definition is to perform a series of explosive power movements in rapid succession in opposing directions. So obviously just that definition itself sounds like a sporting thing, but when you really break it down, it's actually more relevant to a person of older age than you think. So if, for example, like a slip or a fall, that actual definition, to correct yourself from the slip or a fall, means that you need to perform a series, basically it could be a series, it could be just one, but usually it's a series of explosive, really reflex fast movements, often in sort of like a succession of events in an opposing direction to the way you're falling, to prevent the fall. So as much as we're sort of doing it in the sporting situation, it very much relates to life. Unfortunately, the person who has neglected it all their life has completely lost the ability, and the use it or lose it saying here applies significantly. So but it's not just them, older adults, and we're going to go into a bit more detail with that in a second. Also with kids, and we see this a lot these days, kids in planned sports, but really just going straight to the skill of the sport and really neglecting how they move. I don't believe kids spend anywhere near as much time playing as they used to, with all the screen time and stuff like that. Just the way the world has evolved, and they definitely they're not as agile as they should be to be able to play those sports and make it less risky. And I'll go into more detail with that as well. But the thing you really want to understand is the more agile you are, the better you move. So, and the better you move, the less stress you place on your joints. So it doesn't matter what age you are, agility sort of has a real key component to improving movement, and the earlier you learn it, the better it is to do it, and the easier it is to keep it. All right, so I like to sort of use this agility, for me, sort of means freedom of movement. So the first thing that pops into people's head is sporting athletes jumping over hurdles and stuff, and it definitely is that, as we've spoken about. But what you will find is that, and this is a video that I've had on my channel here that you can check out, which relates to ACL injuries. The people that move well, and this girl here, she moved really well out of it. This is a football team that I went and observed, and I did a whole series of tests. She was the only one that really moved well. A lot of the others had really awkward, uncoordinated movements. And you can see here, this is a lateral lunge in the comparison video. You can check out that under a video, I think it was ACL training for females. But you could really see how easily she moved, and she was completely stronger, more powerful, but also less prone to injury than these other people who were, and the reason I was there was because of ACL injuries that they'd sustained. So that's where I say it's like freedom of movement. The more agile, the more they've practiced agility, the better they tend to move. All right, so I used to think movement problems were all to do with lack of strength, and it definitely is a lack of strength, but it didn't explain to me how come people who had incredible strengths could still also move very poorly. And what I realized was that the people who moved the best, it wasn't necessarily their strength that made them so good, it was their ability to move very fast, and especially with great control. So their strength, while it was important, was nowhere near as important to them as their coordination and their timing. And I found that by one of the best ways to improve coordination and timing, because the two biggest factors involved with getting it right, is agility training. All right, so coordination and timing is everything to making you move better. So here's a good little quote from Vladimir Yonder: "Muscle can be as strong as possible, but if it doesn't fire at the right time, it's completely useless." All right, so if I branch this out into the older adult, and why my reasoning for using agility training with speed ladders and hurdles and stuff like that at times, there's certain things I don't necessarily need to do plyometrics with an older adult, but I definitely want to improve things with change of direction skills. And the reason for that is that our ability to move fast declines 2 to 3 times faster than our muscular strength does. So it's all to do with our fast twitch fibers. So the only way to stop the rapid slide is to use exercises and programs that can basically excite this ability and prevent the rapid decline. So power training is one way to do it, and it's a great sort of method, and I do use this a lot as well. The only problem with that is it's sort of really focused on acceleration, and the problems we see with falls is not acceleration, the problem is more to do with deceleration, so learning, which is basically learning to brake. And this is where agility training is still working fast twitch fibers, but really hones in the deceleration phase of the movement, where we see the injury happen. So in an older adult, that's where we would see the fall, but in a younger person, this is also where we see the dreaded ACL injuries, Achilles or broken bones. It's always on the landing. It's always on the where you're trying to slam the brakes on. That's where all the injury mechanisms occur, and it's also where we find hidden weaknesses that you may not see in a simple, slow performed movement. You will really see it when it's done quickly or with load. So this is where I use agility tests to try and find things when it's especially in younger people that make things look good, but I know that there's still a problem. All we need to do is make them move quick to see it really exposed. So it's for this reason that I really see the value of using agility training is for everyone, because who wouldn't want to have a good braking system? And I would really advise people to try and use these drills at least 1 to 2 times per week. The best thing about these drills is you don't need to do you don't need a lot of time. A really good workout might last 10 minutes of these, because a lot of these drills only take maybe 10 seconds to 15 seconds tops. They don't take that long to do. They're just really demanding in a brain capacity way. The speed of the movement, you don't want it to last too long, because then it becomes endurance focused, which ruins your ability to move fast anyway. Right? So you don't need to spend hours doing them. You just need to make them really good and do them all the time and practice and refine them, and then progress where appropriate. So here's an example here of that agility drill using 2 soccer players that we would use for change of direction. This is called a mirror drill. I use this quite a lot with sports, because it really teaches reaction skills of the person who's like chasing, and it teaches evading skills for the person who's got the advantage. So they're trying to learn explosive sort of first step takeoff. I also use it with older adults here, and these 2 guys are both in their 70s, and we're using it for a different purpose, not to improve their soccer performance, but to improve their ability to stop and change direction and prevent themselves from a fall. So some would argue this is dangerous. I would actually argue it's dangerous not doing it. All right, so because they actually need it more than the soccer players. It's nice to play better in soccer, but it's so much more valuable to not fall over and fracture your hip or crack your head open because you couldn't recover from a fall. All right, so I'm going to come back to this in a minute with looking at some of the technique things that happen on this as well. So the thing to understand by these drills is the soccer player and the older adults are bound by the same rules. So the reason for using the drill and the benefits are different, but the rules that are bound, that make the exercise work well, or the purpose of using it, are exactly the same. So the fundamentals are definitely what you need for it to be working efficiently, and where there's less risk, you need to have a series of things. So you need to know how to set your core, you need to understand the athletic position, and the key to it is to stay low. Maintaining postural control and stability is also vital. So it's where we see shoulder sway and people losing, usually standing too upright. So Later on, there's more things that I would add to this checklist of things, but from a basic standpoint, these three things are the key things. So foot plan and that later on becomes also more important. But if I just come back to this picture here, see these guys are a little bit too upright, and that's where they're all too knee based, not enough hip movement. These guys are really quite low. See how they're really sticking the hip out, and they'll have a lower center of gravity. They're less likely to be top heavy and have this shoulder sway, and then which means that they're going to go stand upright and go face first. And in soccer, they're going to fall out of the contest. In this guy's case, they're not going to be able to correct the fall if they're too upright. So they need to sort of learn how to stick their butt out and trust their ability to stay low. Staying low will actually prevent the fall and give them every chance that their reflexes correcting it. All right. So in their case, it makes them faster. In their case, it keeps them safe. So if you still don't believe me that agility training is essential for older adults, well, there's a lot of studies that have been done on this, and you can read through them. There's links in the description here. You can check all that out. There's great articles where I go into even more detail on all this. You can read a lot more about it. But basically, there's one study that was in 2006 that on the importance of rapid limb movement to balance recovery. Noted every time we move volitionally, we throw off our balance. So in another study, they found that when they were evaluating a falls program and they were using just balance training or just strength training or just agility training, they found whole body reaction time improved by 7% with the people who completed agility training exercises versus the ones who only focused on, say, Tai Chi or just balance programs. Balancing is great, but it doesn't actually provide the reflex to correct the problem because it's always a fast movement to correct it. And that's where this is a real essential component of older adults training. So still not sure again if the danger of falls and the prevalence of them, like just how many there are. And this sort of quote here is like from America. There's a fall every 18 seconds for people over the age of 55, and those who do fall, it's usually quite catastrophic. So hip fractures very like 1 in 2, and then 1 of 2 of those die within the first year. So it's, if you were able to just complete a few agility exercises that might have prevented this in the first place, wouldn't you want to do it? Now, on the other side of the spectrum is the exact opposite age group, is the kids age group. So they are also just as essentially needing it as the older adults, ironically. And obviously we love to get kids involved in sports. Unfortunately, we just go straight to the skills thing. We just assume that people know how to move well. And there's really little focus on teaching of running technique, cutting drills, using this hip position. And I work with a lot of kids, and it's amazing how many of them have got a horrible pelvic hip. It's like the worst sort of position you've ever seen for like a bulging disc in an adult. I see this all the time in kids. They just cannot understand how to use their hips. Unfortunately, a lot of sports coaches feel it's unnecessary to do any of this. They just think that it's a waste of time. They'll learn the kid needs to just play the game and work it out. Unfortunately, that's a really ignorant way of thinking. And to demonstrate the danger of this, if all you need to look at is the statistics on ACL injuries to see who it affects the most, and it's the youngest age groups. So the age group between like 15 to 19. So in the females, they're saying between 12 and 18, and they're the highest rate of injury in sports. And an ACL injury is a dreaded injury. It's a season-long injury. It takes a long way to come back. Mentally as much as physically, it can really ruin a kid at an early age and stuff them up for the rest of their life, and can be very easily prevented from learning to move correctly. Strength is not of importance to a kid, it's the ability to move well that is. You can't really build true strength yet when their bones are still growing. All right, it's really about moving them correctly and understanding cutting positions so that they don't blow their knee out on that change of direction drill. So this is when sometimes coaches do put some agility drills in place, but just throw a random sort of stacked cones, hurdles, speed ladders, and they don't really have any idea of what they're doing. Just throw a whole heap together and just ask the kids just to move as quick as they can and hope it all just falls in place. None of that's really going to work if you don't understand the reason for using the drill and actually how to teach the drill correctly and what its purpose a specific purpose of what you're trying to teach them and how it relates to the game itself. And most sporting coaches, they just have no idea what they're doing. And to be fair to them, it's not really their thing. Their thing is more tactics and skills of the game, which is what their skill set is really for. I would just encourage them to probably bring in someone who knows all about this stuff and teaches the kids the value of it as well, because ironically the professional athletes will see a huge benefit to this, and they actually seek people like me out when they're already professional to become even faster, because they can see how it prevents their injuries and makes them an even better professional. So when we're talking about agility training for kids, what I mean is teaching movement. So it's moving efficiently. So this would be really inefficient movement. This is where the ACL tears are likely to happen, and this is the change of direction cutting foot plant, and this is a good foot plant. When we're talking about doing this, we're basically trying to change their brain, their neuromuscular system, not the muscles. So clams, hip extensions, I see so many adults getting kids to do that stuff. It's a waste of time. It's the strength is no use to them. It's more their brain, how that's choosing to move. That's going to be the key to it all. So with if I just go back. So the neuromuscular connections to learn how to youth lay the foundation for the coordination we need in life. So at this age, the brain and the nervous system act like a sponge, and it tries to soak up as much as it can to create the efficient motor programs. This time is where we learn either good movements or we learn really poor and inefficient ones that become permanent bad motor programs and eventually lead to the injury, as we've seen there. So I've taken these slides from another video of my kids' strength training stuff from a few years back, but just to quickly give you an idea of the the time frame of when the neural gains and the time to sort of expose them to this sort of thing. You know, in the first few years, the brain's really going mental trying to find all this stuff out. Around about this 60s is key time for developing the fundamental movement skills, lunge, squat, bending. You can really brainwash a kid really, really fast, and it just sticks with them as long as they keep using it that way. There's a very small change in the bone growth at this stage, so they haven't really started maturing quickly in that part of things, and also muscles. Once they're sort of getting to this part, this is where you're starting to see the kids really getting into organised sports, and this is also, like I was saying, where we see the huge problems in injuries, and especially in this 12 to 14, where they're sort of like starting to hit puberty, and some of them, and the bone growth is starting to be accelerated. This is where huge problems can happen. Real instability is still present. They don't have enough muscle strength yet, but motor programs they've learnt prior to that are starting to be formed and kept as permanent ones, and can really be a huge problem at this age group. So that's really when you want to start doing things, and that'll set the tone for all of the stuff. So as they get to 14 to 16, there's a very small change in their neurodevelopment now. It all happened but prior to that. So it's sort of too late to sort of change things at this age. I wouldn't say it's too late, it's just much more difficult. It's much faster here. All right, you would have rather have done it heaps earlier on. So what about if all the other people, so 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, probably the 40s and 50s is where we're, more in heavy working hours and more pressure of things, probably start to let things slide and just fitting in exercise where we can. I would say maybe it's not as essential at this age group because you still have that good enough strength and can move faster, correct a fall and stuff. But my question is, when is it easier to teach someone to prevent to do agility training? Is it when they're in their mid-70s, they've never done it before, or is it when they're in their 40s? The obvious answer is when they're in their 40s. So if you spend the time to learn it now, it'll save you, like later on. You never lose those skills. You'll be one of those people that can do everything right up until your mid-80s, 90s, right up until your last days. You never lose the skills because you learnt them early on. It's just so much more difficult to try and teach someone in their mid-70s who's stiff as a board and scared of falling all the time. All right, so the thing to understand is we don't all age the same. The people who do that, who preserve things, their range of function stays like this all the time. The people who decide it's not important and just neglect it, they have a really rapid descent. And once they sort of cross this line, this disability threshold, that's when people come to see me for help around this point. It's really difficult to do that. It was so much easier if I was seeing them around here and I could have kept them above the line. All right, so I always sort of say it's much better to work on it before it's a problem than when it's already happened. So what can you do about it? Well, there's a ton of videos I'm going to release shortly. So that's why I wanted to have this video to sort of emphasize to the point that you may not think it's for you. You think, oh, it's only for sports people. No, it's for you. All right. So the key is start with the basics. So the basic concept of agility is really understanding that to move to the left, I must push off from the right. So I really need to have some sort of single leg and split stance strength where I'm, like lunges and single leg squat, lateral lunges probably even more so. But just understanding that I need to transfer my weight very quickly from the one side to the next. So I need to have these fundamental movement skills. Learning how to sort of get in athletic position. So a good quote here from Mike Boyle: if you cannot decelerate, you'll never be able to change direction and accelerate. So it's really more about learning to brake than trying to accelerate, like thinking of yourself as a sprinter. It's more about just learning to stop. So the goal is always efficient, effortless, flowing movement, and you're trying to make it transfer to the functional task. So this is where I won't be using plyometrics with older adults. I'll be sort of really using change of direction things, maybe shuffling drills, in multi-directional things. But I don't need them to do jumping. I don't need them to jump. It's more cutting things. Where, say, other people, it is the jumping, landing from jumps especially. All right, so as long as you understand your purpose and the reason for it, you'll pick the right exercise. So the key fundamental position is the athletic ready position, and I did a video on this just the other day. This is really an important thing, because if you start in a poor position, you're just going to really continue and end up in a poor position. So going back to that older adults video of the mirror drill before, how they were sort of too upright, we would need to teach them that athletic position better and get them to understand how to stay low. There's a little checklist here that you can use: fault sheet, feet shoulder width, weight evenly distributed, neutral spine, knees slightly flexed, hips low, chest up, core set. Pretty simple stuff, but it's amazing how many people just don't do it and understand that position. So this would be like a 2-foot stance. This would be like your single leg stance. Really optimal position to load through the hip and explode in any direction. All right, so this is the video I'm referring to that I just put up the other day. So, and I go through, there's I think 6 tests that I use to help sort of determine. So it crosses all the different parts of the older adult, the kid, and even some of the sporting people, the fundamentals that you would want to start with. All right, so in summary, agility needed for people of all ages, not just those who play sports. Older adults and kids need it the most, ironically. If you learn it as a kid, it's much easier to do it later in life, so you probably don't need to learn it as an adult, you just need to maintain it. So if you maintain it, it's important. So even if you're in your 40s, 50s, you want to sort of get into it before you've lost too many fast twitch fibers and stiffened up too much. Learn the fundamentals before applying the more challenging drills to come, and make sure your exercise selection has a reason for being used and it's not just a random set of drills. And never stop trying to improve. Keep trying to sort of push the boundaries, make sure it's safe, but don't be afraid to sort of take it to the next level. And I'm going to give you heaps. There literally is hundreds of these drills. Now, I'm going to give you just a sample of some of them that you can try, but I just wanted you to understand that there's a reason for using this that's more about just making you move well. All right, so if you've got any questions, comments, go to the website. Check out the description below. There's heaps of stuff. There's heaps of free reports you can grab. So these are more of the advanced online ones. So the ACL one very much has a whole section on agility training for sports and stuff to prevent the ACL knee injury. So it's a really great one. And these 2 programs just really cover more fundamentals. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this video and get something out of it, and you can use it in your own training. And yeah, stay tuned for further updates with agility exercises. All right, see you soon.